Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Flow State Podcast. We are your hosts
I'm Norah Candito.
and Monica Groney. All right, we're all about finding balance, so let's go ahead and get into the flow. Today, we are chatting and getting to know Nora a little bit better. I'm really excited for this episode. Nora and I have known each other for not that long, but seemingly have gotten quite close in a very short period of time. And yeah, I'm just really excited to kind of dive in, learn more about Nora, who is an amazing registered dietitian who focuses on GI and hormone health. So we have so much to learn from Nora. Let's go ahead and dive in. I think we talked about this a bit in episode one, but if you are just tuning in today and haven't listened to episode one, let's kind of take it back and hear your first period story.
Yeah. So growing up, I was a gymnast for over 11 years and I had a series of unfortunate injuries and I ended up quitting when I was 14. Within 6 months of stopping, my body was like, thank you, Lord. Like, we needed this because I finally got my period. And it arrived on the day that my family was leaving for a trip to go to England. And my first period ever. I was talking briefly in the last episode of it was the most beautiful period, like super light, not no symptoms leading up to it, totally manageable. That But I wasn't really expecting it, but when it happened, I knew exactly what it was. I was definitely on the later end of people in my group. I remember even in sixth grade, this one girl was like, all right, code word. Like, period is the tampons are Tootsie Rolls. So we'd be like, oh, did you get your red binder? And of course, I like felt pretty left out because I did not get my red binder. And it took me a little bit of time, but just such a tribute to like your body feeling like it needs to be in a safe enough place. It typically happens when we have maybe a change in our body composition. So after I had been competing at this pretty high level and toning down my workouts, my body was like, okay, we can do this. But yeah, then shortly after, like I remember getting it really hard, really heavy, multiple times in a very short period of time. And I was like, Mom, is this normal? And my mom did not have any period issues. So she was like, okay, we'll go to the doctor. I ended up missing 18 days of my freshman year of high school, which really like met in terms of my academics. And I didn't even want to go to school because I was like bleeding through a super tampon in an hour. It was awful. And so when I went to my PCP, she was like, yeah, like you're a great candidate to go on the pill. And it worked. Like it made things so much more manageable. That, my only, in quotes, symptoms were heavy and irregular periods. But it was a really, really helpful tool for me.
Yeah, I relate to so much of this, and it's so fun to hear that you were a gymnast because I was too. Um, but I had like obviously an
No.
opposite experience of getting my period quite early. So it's just so crazy. Everyone's story is a little bit different. And how long were you on the pill for?
10 years. Yeah, kind of on and off. Like sometimes I would take a summer off because I thought it was a good thing to let my body go back and have its natural cycle. Like, I don't know where I got that information or what I thought it was doing. I have no idea. But my senior year of college started to have some acne that I had never had before. And I was like, this is definitely a hormone thing. So I ended up getting an IUD in November. And by December, like I had cystic acne all on my cheeks, which I had never experienced before. And I went to a dermatologist at school who put me on an antibiotic for, I think it was, I lasted like 6 weeks and it helped my skin, but I ended up getting a stomach ulcer from the antibiotic. So I had to be on like a PPI and heal the stomach ulcer. And then I actually had some cysts rupture. Like I fainted a couple of times when they ruptured in like April of that same year. So I got the IUD out and went back on the pill because I was like, well, I know that this works. And I was sexually active at that time. So I wanted to have some sort of protection. But yeah, like that was the first inkling that I knew there was a connection between some of the skin stuff happening and my hormones, and that quick solution was just going back on the pill. But that's really where all of my GI issues started, was taking that antibiotic for way too long and going into when I started my dietetic internship to become a registered dietitian. I remember like I couldn't even touch chickpeas without looking 6 months pregnant. Avocados totally effed my stomach, like all of these quote healthy foods. And I was like, what is going on? Like I've never had food issues before. I've always eaten everything without an issue. Where is this coming from? And that lasted until March of the following year. And then I started having scary symptoms. I started having heart palpitations. I wasn't sleeping through the night, waking every hour. I had these cracks on the sides of my lips and these horizontal ridges on my nails. And I started getting like metallic taste in my mouth with everything. And I went to my PCP at home and I was like, I have a B vitamin deficiency. Like, I'm literally studying this. I know you need to check my B12 value. And she was like, I don't think so. Like, I think you're fine. It's supposed to be between like 500 and 900 is a healthy range. And I was below 100.
Oh my
So
God.
B12 is the only B vitamin that our body actually stores. We store it in our liver. We store it in some of our muscle cells. So that like insult to injury, whatever had happened, probably either the antibiotic or even, as we talked about in the last episode, that the pill depletes these B vitamins. I ended up having such a severe deficiency that I was having all of those really scary heart palpitations and things, because every energy producing reaction in our body needs those B vitamins, and I was missing that key nutrient. So things just weren't working well, and I felt crazy, like absolutely
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, B vitamins too have a pretty good effect on mood, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, I was getting like intramuscular injections that I would have to give myself on a regular basis for the rest of my dietetic internship. And I finally, one of my rotations was at a GI clinic, and they were talking all about SIBO, and I had never heard about it before. And I did a breath test there that was positive. And so I was working with one of the GI doctors there, and I got tested to make sure I didn't have pernicious anemia, which is more of an autoimmune form when you have a vitamin B12 deficiency. All of that came back normal. Ended up getting like a endoscopy and colonoscopy, and they were like, "Yep, all looks good. We think that your GI issues and your SIBO likely came from the pill."
Can you
So,
explain what SIBO is, just for
yeah.
anyone listening?
Yeah, great reminder. SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So that whole like ecosystem of bacteria that we're meant to have in our body, the majority of it lives in our large intestine or our colon. But things can migrate, or other conditions can make us have overgrowth. There's naturally some bacteria in our small intestine, but the majority is not meant to live there. And the small intestine is where majority of our nutrients are absorbed. So that's also a reason why I likely had this B12 deficiency, is because I had the bacterial overgrowth. They feed off of the B12, and also in the large intestine, that's where some B12 is made. So for all of those reasons, I did the treatment for SIBO, but they were like, yeah, we recommend you go off of the pill. No instruction, nothing. Like, that was October of 2018. And I actually, when I finished my master's, I went to Texas to do a fellowship at Texas Children's Hospital, learning more about premature infants and doing like they receive nutrition when they're that small through their veins. So it's very, very sciencey, very math heavy part of nutrition. And I was in Texas, living alone, running all the time because I was so freaking bored. And eating well, like exercising more than ever. And my acne, within 3-4 months of coming off the pill, came back with a vengeance. Like Never ever before. I ended up gaining a significant amount of weight for me. I've lived at the same weight since I was in 10th grade, and I had a pretty big jump in a very short period of time. And I was just like, okay, I need to work out harder. I need to push myself more. Like, why am I gaining weight? Why is all of this stuff happening? That's where like a lot of my knowledge started. I just started researching and learning and trying to understand like why this was happening. And I
Yeah.
did not think about the connection.
So for anyone listening too, I think it'd be super interesting for you to explain a little bit of like why that weight gain and acne coming back can happen when you transition off of the pill.
Totally. So I think it is a little bit individualized for each person. What I think for me was there was a lot of inflammation and stuff in my GI tract in general. Like I had started having GI issues a year and a half before I even came off the pill. So there had likely been this underlying thing for a while. And when there's inflammation in your gut, that is sending signals to your thyroid. Your thyroid controls so many different functions in our body, but big ones are our metabolism, our moves throughout your system, heart rate, your sleep, your hormone production. So if my gut was inflamed and sending signals to my thyroid, like you need to slow everything down. Like we can't afford to extend this energy with the amount that I was exercising. I don't know if I was even eating enough at that point, but I think that made that transition so challenging for my body coming off of the pill was that I never addressed that underlying GI component. They were like, the pill is likely causing it, but took an antibiotic specifically for SIBO, that bacterial overgrowth. It's called rifaximin, and it helped my GI symptoms somewhat, but it definitely was not enough to clear what I think was likely causing a lot of those issues.
What are some of the things that you could have done, like looking back now, that you could have done to support that those gut and underlying issues that you were having?
Totally. I mean, just because I had a clear colonoscopy and endoscopy doesn't mean that like they can't visibly see that bacterial overgrowth. So after I did the treatment, like I should have been retested. So we could have done a breath test at that point to see if it was really gone. But the test that I use in my practice actually looks at more of the large intestine and seeing if there's adequate immune function, if you are not absorbing fat in your system, if there's any sort of bacterial overgrowth or yeast present, which is also a huge connection with birth control. We can have yeast overgrowth. So that's like, if I could go back 6+ years ago at this point, like I wish I had done this GI map test that I offer now and seen like, okay, you have 5 things that we really need to address before you can even come off the pill or before things are going to even out. Like these are the things that we need to focus on, and knowing like diet and lifestyle things that would have been supportive, like we talked about in the last episode, like being on a great quality multivitamin before coming off of the pill. I think that would have helped, especially with the acne, tremendously. And same with the thyroid stuff. Your thyroid needs nutrients too to function. And I just don't think my body had enough of them.
And when you take like this GI test, the GI mapping that you do, it shows like yeast and all of these things.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow, I want to do one.
It's super comprehensive. It's absolutely like for every person that has been told nothing's wrong or just been given this IBS, the irritable bowel syndrome diagnosis, there's something wrong. They just haven't found it. And that's what this test is so helpful in seeing, is what is contributing to maybe that baseline inflammation, your bloating, your constipation, your diarrhea, because it's not just that SIBO or the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It's typically in the larger. And it doesn't just have to be celiac disease or the inflammatory bowel disease, which is Crohn's and ulcerative colitis.
Yeah, my dad has Crohn's, so I've spent my whole life being like, oh no, do I have Crohn's?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I totally get that one. Okay, let's bring it back to you a little bit. This information is so amazing and obviously part of your journey. But I'm kind of curious. You were talking about how you were in college and you got put on the antibiotic for like cysts and ulcers and all these, or
Yep. The
anyways, somewhere around
antibiotic was
then.
the acne.
Got it. Okay. For the acne. And at that time, were you studying to be a dietitian?
Yeah. Yeah. I was like about to graduate from my undergrad in nutrition specifically, going into my clinical program to become a registered dietitian.
Okay, I think this is a really good segue just to educate the audience a little bit because I feel like, and I didn't even know this until I got in the nutritional industry of like, what is the difference between a dietitian, a nutritionist, and a functional health coach? Because we
Yeah.
see all these people, on Instagram and just in the world, and they're like, I'm a functional nutritionist, or
Hmm.
I'm a nutritionist, or I'm a dietitian. Can you explain the difference in those a little bit?
Absolutely. So you can call yourself a nutritionist. Nutritionist is not a regulated term. You can slap that title onto their name and say, like, oh, I've studied nutrition. A registered dietitian has gone through 4 years of schooling in undergrad. We then have to complete a supervised practice kind of residency, and then we have to sit for a board exam. We have a license. So that means I also like malpractice insurance practitioner now because I'm liable. Whereas even people online who identify as a nutritionist or a health coach, for example, they don't have that liability. Like they're not going to jeopardize the same licensure that could be revoked if they are not practicing legitimately or if they give poor advice or somebody gets sick, etc., from their work. They can still like be sued and then people literally come after you individually. So, my protection is that that would not happen with having insurance, thankfully. But the difference with like functional side of things too is kind of similar. So, my training was very traditional medicine. And it's so interesting. Like doctors literally receive maybe one course, maybe 20 hours worth of nutrition training. They don't know this stuff. And I was recently talking to somebody in med school, and they are told in their programs, like, you should prescribe things, give them the nutrition or the diet and lifestyle recommendations because a lot of these schools supposedly have deals with like big pharma companies where they're supposed to keep up with prescribing medications, etc. That like blows my mind. But I didn't learn any of this stuff in school. Like it was all self-learning, and especially the functional side of things, it is a lot of self-learning. There are different programs out there where you can get certificates, but they're not really regulated by an overseeing body for the most part. And same with that title. Like I said, anybody can just say like, "Oh, you can even say you're a certified nutritionist." And that sounds really legitimate. But unless it says registered dietitian, they do not have the qualifications. That means they shouldn't be providing what's called medical nutrition. Nobody else is allowed to prescribe or recommend meal plans, like not a personal trainer, not a health coach. They're not allowed legally to do that. It should only be under the care of a registered dietitian, which is really interesting.
Even people who have the like CDN, which is like they did go to some school, right?
So, what do you know which, like, I feel like those credentials could mean multiple things, but
Yeah, I
are they
don't know.
like,
I just know like I do know a couple of nutritionists who like did go to school for nutrition versus like me, who's like obviously studied a lot about nutrition, but I have no biology background.
right?
So I'm just kind
No,
of curious. I
really
don't know.
only registered dietitians are allowed to uh, recommend and quote prescribe meal plan.
Yeah, that is crazy. So, for anyone out there listening, I feel like that's just such a good thing to know there's so many people that are so knowledgeable that aren't dietitians. And that doesn't
Absolutely.
mean if you're working with someone that they're not like legit or like educated and can help you, but they're more like a guide and can provide general guidance, is my understanding. Whereas you have the ability to actually dig in and individualize a plan.
There's such a spectrum of dietitians too, though. Like, there are dietitians that don't believe in the work that I do because they've only followed and done what they learned in school. And if that's what I was doing, I'd still be in the same, I'd still probably have cystic acne and feel miserable and have no energy and just feel like garbage. So, I'm thankful that my own story is what led me down this path. And now I'm able to help so many other people figure this stuff out. And I would have missed all of that.
Yeah, totally. So what made you initially want to go into dietetics? Is that how you
Yeah,
say it?
exactly. Perfect. Yeah, I think it was kind of a combination of a lot of things. I was obviously in sport, so I had a lot of interest. We never talked about nutrition at gymnastics. I had former Olympians as coaches, and I think it was just like an area that they did not really focus on for us. And thankfully, like, nobody ever made comments about my body. My mom never made comments about my body, and I'm so grateful for that, especially being in an aesthetic sport. But I enjoyed cooking and I just liked nutrition in general. I always really liked science, but I actually wrote like my senior high school paper on the connection between what we eat and our skin health. So I entered into nutrition at Penn State wanting to become a dermatologist, actually, which is ironic because I never had skin issues. And I thought this huge connection between what we eat impacted our skin. It's the largest organ in our body. I thought it was so cool. After I got to school, I was like, I do not want to do 12 plus more years of this. No thanks. So I started shadowing all of these different dietitians, some on campus, the sports dietitian at school, at a D1 school. Like, it was amazing. I went to a renal facility seeing a dietitian in a dialysis clinic. And I created opportunity after opportunity for myself to make sure this was the job that I really wanted to do. And until I had that rotation in the GI clinic in the middle of my internship, I didn't feel like I had found my resting place. And there, I just saw people actually listening and following the recommendations from the dietitian and seeing the dramatic improvement in their quality of life. And how, like, it literally, I have clients right now who they previously weren't able to perform well in their sport, and by treating and adjusting their GI issues, they're hitting their PRs and their marathons. They feel better. They have the energy to do things now. It's beyond that. But, it's that's what really like changed things for me, was seeing just how much I could help improve somebody's whole quality of life through nutrition.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And there's like a lesson in there too for anyone listening. I think of we have to try. I think it's so often we see people who are doing their thing and are really passionate about what they're doing. And so they feel like they've like found it and are living this like glamorous life, right? And people are like, oh, I want that. How do I get that? And it's like just hearing you talk about it, you tried so many things before you found the thing. So it's just like, keep trying. Something's going to click that you're going to be like, yes, this is it.
Even opening my own practice, like, this is the longest that I've ever had the same job. And it's because each job that I had after school, I was like, nope, like, not doing it, not checking on the boxes. It is not fulfilling. I don't feel like I'm being listened to or validated in my role. And yeah, I think that those words are so perfect, Monica, of saying, like, until your job doesn't have to be everything, also. This is such a tangent, but like, having this satisfaction in my job makes me excited, and I feel so renewed and feel so grateful that all of this has happened and that I made it happen, honestly. But knowing that it is possible and you can have that kind of excitement about your work.
Yeah. What were some of the jobs that you had between school and now having your own practice?
Yeah. So after I moved up to Boston right after Texas, it was just a short fellowship. I didn't love the feeding infants through their veins. I never got to talk to their parents. I'm a super social human, if you couldn't tell. And I just thought it was a huge missed opportunity. I didn't want to sit behind a screen all day. So I did start working at a hospital when I moved up to Boston. It was just an adult hospital. I saw oncology patients and all sorts of different things. But again, it's not it for me. Like, not able to form a relationship. You see these people once, you never know if they're listening to what you're saying or not. So I felt like I was pretty dispensable. I got recruited out of that job to go and work for Titleist, the golf company, actually.
So cool.
So I was their corporate dietitian for all of their employees, which was awesome. And that was really like my first taste of autonomy. I created my own practice just within an institution. And I saw this huge gap. I had so many perimenopausal women that were navigating weight changes, hormone issues. And I said to my manager, I was like, I want to create a program. I want to help them. Like, they're all coming to me for the same things. And they were like, nah, I think you should do one for diabetes, because they had certain metrics that they had to meet as a company. And I was like, I literally, like, I'm seeing and listening to these people. This is what they need. Like, I want to make it. And in the pandemic, they decided to get rid of my job, which was a beautiful, like, thing. It honestly was the best thing for me. So we got married in the middle of the pandemic. What a fun thing to do. And I ended up having like 4 months to plan and do everything for our wedding. And then I started working at Boston Children's Hospital after that. And they needed me to cover a temporary position for somebody out on maternity leave. And I felt like from the day I started until I finished, I was just sprinting. Like, I could never catch up. I was so overwhelmed. It was a very fragile patient population. And I wanted more support and learning. And it was really hard doing that job remotely. And they promised me a full-time role. But at the end of that position, I was like, thank you. Like, you held your word. But again, I don't feel like this is for me. So I left, and I was going to just open my own practice at that point. But I was reached out to by another private practice dietitian literally within 24 hours of me leaving my job. So for 2 weeks while I was, closing out everything for the hospital, I was already training for this new role. And they focused on GI and hormone things. And I was like experiencing another wave of my own issues again at that time, just a year and a half ago. Yeah, so much more to that. But at the end of our time, I didn't completely align with the way that they were practicing. And I was like, if I can do this for somebody else, I should be doing this for myself. And I am so much happier. Even just, there's no job description. The possibilities are completely limitless. I'm so much more creative in this role. And that just feels like the fact that we're sitting here today. If somebody even told me a year ago, Nora, this is what you'll be doing, like, I would have cried probably. Like, it just warms my heart so much. I've met so many incredible people because of the steps and the initiatives that I've taken. And I'm so grateful that led me to you and that we're here.
Yeah, I'm so grateful too. I mean, that's such an amazing journey. And for you to take that step to go out on your own, it's so big and so intimidating. And for it to feel rewarding is like the most amazing thing. So, why don't you share with everyone, real quick, before we go into a quick lightning round and wrap things up, just what some of the things in your practice are that you offer? And also, I think that the way that you work with other studying dietitians and stuff is really cool. So, share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, so helpful having this group community environment, even just going one-on-one with people, seeing them in being held and supported by a group of people has collapsed their healing timeline. People were getting pregnant in 3 months where they had been trying to conceive for 2.5 years, just by being in this room with other people, having some accountability, etc. So I created this program. It's called Harmonize, and the structure is I really, I'm my ideal client. Like when I describe who I want to work with, it's because I've had my own experience. I feel comfortable with that. But the thing that's most important for me is I don't want people to have to rely on a coach or a dietitian or a nutritionist, whomever in the future. I want them to be informed and educated and empowered by this information, by knowing so much about their hormones that if something were to happen in the future, they can kind of troubleshoot things or know what's going to help to get them back to that flow state, so to speak. So that has been so beautiful. I bring different guest speakers into my group to provide just more education and value. So we have a pelvic floor physical therapist come in. I love craniosacral work, so I always have someone come in to talk about that. Just breath work, meditation. So much of the healing has to do with our mindset. So I bring that structure into the group program as well. And that's been great.
Yeah, I think that's so important, that like mindset piece is we can sit and say that there's nothing we can do about it for a really long time and play that victim role. But it's like as soon as we decide to step into the ownership, it's like game on. Things are going to change for you.
Yeah. I did want to share like how my story kind of ended. So like I moved up to Boston and I was riddled with acne and this weight change and whatnot, and I was waking up and going to Soul Cycle at 6 a.m. like being a hard ass, and I would come home and just crash, like so depleted, no energy, fell flat on my face after those classes. Yet I would do it to myself over and over again. So I completely stopped exercising. I had to give my body a way to just stop feeling so stressed all the time. So I stopped exercising. I was just walking. I didn't really change my nutrition. I had already been, fueling myself well. I had this education. But that for me was the biggest turning point. And then I started changing a lot of the products that I was using. I read this book called Sicker, Fatter, Poorer, and learned all about like endocrine disruptors, which we'll definitely dive into at some point here. But I completely overhauled all of my beauty products, all of my cleaning products, laundry detergent, all of these things that could have also been effing with my hormones. And I saw a very dramatic difference happen within months, honestly, like such a short period of time. And just helping to support my body and my nervous system, calm things down as a whole, like that was the turning point for me. That's what made that cycle stop, and for my period to become more normal again, and for the acne to clear on its own.
And how long was that period of like not exercising?
Oh man, like 6 months at least.
And what does that look like? You say not exercising, but I'm sure you were still moving your body in some way. Like what did
Just
that
walking,
yeah. Okay.
only walking, like super low intensity. I would stretch, I would do yoga, but no high intensity, no running, no biking for me. Like that's my endurance and higher sport. But I just really had to give my body a break. And then I, I started exercising again, and I felt great when I did bring that back. So many benefits in movement, but I absolutely need change in order for my body to just come down off of that stress high.
Yeah. Wow, crazy. Full circle. That is so amazing. Okay, anything else that you want to share before we go through a quick lightning round of a couple of questions?
No, let's do it.
Okay, awesome. All right, what is one book that has changed your life?
So the first book I read learning all things hormones, cycle syncing, was In the Flow by Alyssa Vitti. It was like the precipice. That was what really helped me to start learning. And that's, 4 years ago at this point.
Yeah, love that book. I have it on my shelf. Okay. Favorite way to de-stress?
Still walking. That is like my thing. I it's a non-negotiable for me getting a walk in every day.
She's a hot girl walker, people.
I'm a girl.
Okay, which is more important to you, your morning routine or your nighttime routine?
I'm a morning person for sure.
What are a few things in your morning routine?
Walking with a dog, always. Getting a good, nourishing breakfast in. And even within the last year, I've been doing like a pulling a card from a deck and using that as a journal prompt. So I'll kind of start my day with that if it's a little inspiration or just a way for me to clear my mind before I dive into work.
Do you have a deck right there? What is it?
I do. So this was gifted from Diana, our business coach. So it's the wild unknown. Oh, the spirit
Yep.
animal. Animal spirit. Yeah, it's really good.
Amazing.
I want to get more.
I have one, the archetypes one, and it's really fun as well.
Cool.
Okay, and last question, your favorite meal to cook?
Anything curry. I love curry. It feels like a warm hug from the inside out.
Green, red, or yellow?
Mine's like more of an orange every time.
Okay.
I don't use like a curry paste or anything. My classic seasonings are turmeric, uh, cumin, curry powder. I use like garam masala, ginger, yeah, garlic.
Oh my God, amazing. She is chefing it up from scratch. We
Oh
love
yeah.
that. Okay, where can everyone find you on the internet?
Yeah. My Instagram everything handle is nutrition with Norah. My website, same, everywhere. We're working on maybe jumping on TikTok. I don't know.
Yeah, highly recommend. All right, well, thank you everyone for tuning in to today's episode. If you loved enjoy, I'm gonna redo that. Thank you everyone for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to hit the subscribe on whatever platform you are listening. Rate and review us because that helps us as a amazing duo of creators. We love your support and we will see you for the next episode. Bye
See you next
everyone.
time. Bye.